Network connections, installing a Keystone jack and crimping cable. By the time we're done here, you will be able to select and install a Keystone jack and crimp an end on network cabling. Bonus, it's a 2-for-1 video. In the last nugget, we installed a patch panel and terminated one end of the cable. Now we're going to focus on the other end, both with a Keystone jack and crimping cable. The tools you'll need to accomplish this are actually similar to what we used in some of the previous videos. First off, you've got a punch down tool, which is going to be what locks your cable in place. And I'm specifically focusing on the Keystone jack, which really is just a one-port patch panel. You've got your drywall jab saw, so if you need to do any more drywall modifications, you have a tool to do it. And then your tool for crimping the cable. First off, a cable crimper, which takes the raw cable and slams on a tip like this. Technically, this tool pushes down on these copper connectors. Inside of this tip, it has these little alligator teeth that pierce these wires and touch the copper cabling inside. This guy is one we've used previously to strip off the shielding on the cable so we can get to the 8 wires inside. Now there's different kinds of tips out there that are available. My favorite is the one that allows you to pull these individual wires through the tip of the cable. If you're going to use these tips, you're definitely going to want a cable crimper that has a cutter integrated with the crimping component. So that way when you crimp down the cable, it automatically slices off all of the extra that's sitting out here. Well, before we go any further, let's talk about what is a Keystone jack. Now, I've been calling it that, but technically it's known as a Keystone module. And the reason the word module is important is because it's a changeable piece that you can install inside of a wall plate. So the wall plate itself is designed with a standard sized square, and then you choose your Keystone module to slide in there and snap into place. I wanted to slide over a quick Google Images search. So you guys can see these things come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's a 3-port plate, a 6-port plate. There's some examples of Keystones in action. So we've got, it looks like an Ethernet jack there, a BNC connector right there. I can't really tell what the others are. Those kind of look like RCA jacks over there. Oh, and perfect. Look at this. This shows somebody installing one. So this is what the module looks like. And as you slide it forward, this little latch on the top catches the plastic and snaps it into place. You can see it a little better if you look at that image. Now, as it relates to our task at hand, we are running an Ethernet Keystone jack. And I like to call them a micro-sized patch panel. That's because it has the same style of fittings as a patch panel on the back. We use a punch down tool to snap each one of these things in place. Some of these modules actually come with little plastic pieces that you can snap on top that do the punching for you. So you can say, oh, well, I don't need a punch down tool. And while I could say maybe that's technically accurate, there's no replacing a punch down tool. Sometimes those little plastic connectors won't push them down all the way or whatever. I definitely prefer a punch down tool to do it. So put the puzzle pieces together. In one of the previous videos, we installed this gang adapter into the drywall. And what this did was give us a mounting surface for this plate. So we screwed these in, and that actually braces this plastic square plate to the back of the drywall so we have a secure fitting. From there, we can punch the cable into our Keystone module, snap it into the faceplate, and then screw the faceplate onto that gang adapter. Now, I wanted to give you this as another example of a Keystone module because I've seen this happen in a few situations where somebody actually crimps an end on both sides of the cable, and so they buy a Keystone adapter that has 2 female connections for RJ45. That way you can plug one Ethernet cable into here and take another Ethernet cable out. The last thing I want to emphasize is right on the side of that. I've mentioned this before and I want to mention it again, the T568 A and B standard. The order of the wires does matter. And right there on the side of this jack, I can see T568A, and I see the blue, so that's the solid blue, like you can see right there. Blue stripe, so you would put the blue stripe in there. So to follow the T568A standard, you would put them in this way. If I wanted to have T568B, I would have the same blue ones just like that, but then over on these, I would put in orange and then orange stripe. Works exactly the same as a patch panel. If you use T568A on the patch panel, you want to use T568A on the Keystone jack, and vice versa, T568B on both sides. Now, I will tell you, in our modern world, devices have become smarter. And if you have a jack, let's just say this is your wall jack and it runs over here to a patch panel, and you do T568A on one side and B on the other, and let's just say you have a computer right here plugged into a switch connected to the patch panel. Modern devices can actually detect the mismatch and fix it for you. However, you don't want to rely on modern technology to fix a wiring problem. Simply pick a standard and stick to it on both sides. To get the wall plate put on here, the first thing we have to do is get this hole size just right. Now, I mentioned this in the previous nugget. It's a great little contraption to ensure your wall plate goes on there just right. Now, usually you would have a level to make sure this thing is just flush. I don't have one of those on me right now, so what I'm going to do is put this cable through like this, line it up about so, and then draw a frame around this. Like so. Now we've got the outside frame drawn in. We can look at this and see about how far the inside frame is. If you use the same model of these all the time, you'll probably create a template that you can use. You just line up on the wall and cut it exactly. But for now, I'll just look at it's about 1/2 inch in. Drywall knife. Got to be careful not to hit your cable back there. That's about right. Let's get it on there. Squeeze it in. Perfect. Screwdriver. Tighten that guy down. Now it's time to strip this cable down and put it into the Keystone jack. A lot of people use cable strippers like this, and there's nothing wrong with them. You got a little razor blade. You'll screw the screw to adjust the cut diameter of how deep it will cut into that. There's just so many different cable shapes and sizes that a lot of times you'll just end up cutting the inside cable with one of these. So you might end up investing in some good scissors like this. These are actually cabling scissors. You take it and you can control the pressure that you put on there as you run it around the cable shielding. There we go. It's a little short. Usually going to go about 2 inches down, but that should be all right. Inside you can see all the different colored cabling. Should be 8 of them, different colors like this, as well as the insulation. Bend those cables down and snip that insulation out of there. You then want to untwist every single one of these wires. If you're doing this with me, don't worry. You do this enough, your fingers will get nice calloused, and you won't even feel the pain of twisting these wires, or at least you'll go numb to it. There we go. 8 individual wires, 8 individual color markings. Now we grab our Keystone jack. Right on the side of the Keystone jack, they show you the 2 different standards, T568A and T568B. You want to use one or the other, and you can see on both sides showing you which colors go where. Now it's just a matter of lining up the wires to the colors. There we go. Punch down tool. Now I'm going to use this to take each one of those wires and punch it down deep in there to where it actually strips the shielding of that individual wire and touches it to the contact. You also want to make sure that that razor sharp edge of the cutter is faced away to where it will actually cut the extra cable off on the outside, not on the inside. You'll know it's punched in when it makes a snap noise like that. I don't know why, but I love that noise. Snap. The extra cable, well, you just wiggle and it'll typically pull off on the outside. All right, there we go, all punched down. Now we just grab the wall plate, snap this into place, and screw the wall plate into place. Good. Keystone jack, check. Now let's get the end crimped onto this cable so we can plug in the wireless access point. When you're crimping an end on the cable, the first thing you want to do is strip off enough of this shielding so that you can get to the internal wires and they're easy to work with. For me, that's about 2 to 3 inches. So I'll take my cable stripper, put it on there right about there. Twist that cable around and boom, pull it off. Now I'm going to separate each one of these twisted pairs of wires. That allows me to get to this big chunk of insulation in the middle. Now I'm going to use the cable cutter to chop that right out of there. And then I'll untwist each one of these pairs of wires. You want to untwist it as far down as you can, right to that shielding. There we go. Individual wires. Orange, orange stripe. Blue stripe, blue. Brown stripe, brown. Green, green stripe. Now I'm going to arrange these wires in whatever standard I'm trying to match, T568A and T568B. If you punched in the patch panel as T568A, then arrange these in T568A. If you made them B, make them B. If you match an A to a B, meaning on this side we wire it T568A and on the other side we wire it T568B, we've technically made what's known as a crossover cable. So our patch panel is wired with T568A. I'm going to match that. Green stripe, green. Orange stripe, blue. Blue stripe, orange. They're starting to fight me. Because of all the twists, you're going to have to kind of wiggle these things out and keep them straight. Brown stripe, brown. Now you can see I'm just moving and wiggling these cables to get them to stay the way I have them. they're always going to try and move back to the way they're twisted inside of the shielding. The reason I'm doing this is we need to put on here this tip. And this is why I like the tips that allow you to slide through the wires best, is because you can get them all in the right order right up here at the top, slide them in, and then cut off the excess right at the end of this tip. So I'm going to get just enough that I need to slide through there, right about there. Take my cable cutter and snip off the rest. There we go. Green stripe green, orange stripe blue, blue stripe orange, brown stripe brown. All right, we'll take that tip and try and slide them in there. There we go. Now we just pull the excess through until you reach the point where you've got the shielding inside of that tip. I'll take my cutters and do a little chop just so it's not so unruly. I'll take my tip and put it inside of the crimpers, which also has a cutter on the other end, and crimp it down. Notice all these little pieces just fell off on the other end. We've now crimped an end on the cable. And now I can do the same thing for these cables coming out of the ceiling that we'll be using for our WAPs. Just so you know, your arms will probably get tired as you sit here trying to get all these wires straightened out. If you find yourself getting very frustrated with these little wires, that's also very normal. And crimp. Try to hang on to the little wires so you don't make a big mess. And tuck that back up in the ceiling for now. We now have a Keystone jack installed behind the desk, as well as a tip added to the cable, so it's ready to plug into that wireless access point when we get to that point of the installation. Behind the scenes, I'm going to go crimp an end on this cable as well. But if you combine the last nugget and this one, which was installing that patch panel, we now have a cable run end to end that's ready to plug into a device on each end of the connection. That is so awesome. And I can't wait to move forward as we build this network environment. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that you will be able to select and install a Keystone jack and crimp an end on network cabling. And here's how we're going to practically prove it. First, I'd like you to purchase all the needed tips, Keystone jacks, and faceplates and tools to terminate the user-facing side of the network connection. Previously, we did the patch panel. Now we're out in the user community. Even if the user community is your bedroom, locate the non-ceiling location that you selected previously and install the Keystone jack and faceplate. So this will be the wall port, where you previously fished the cable down the wall and pulled it out. From there, I said practice crimping an end on the cable, because if you're doing this in your home, I don't want you to drill a hole in your ceiling just for the sake of it if you don't need a wireless access point there. However, it's extra credit to do so. It makes a great conversation piece if you have friends and family visit. If you find yourself at a place where you can't practically do this, then the theoretical step is to research the T568A and B standards, determine which one you'd like to use for your organization, and then also determine what happens if you don't follow the T568 network standards. From there, create the parts list to perform this installation. All of this can be done using Google research. This just keeps getting better and better. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.